Hi everyone, hope you are doing well today. We're going to be continuing with our portfolio and adding pagination into our blog. So if you remember from last time, we have our data fetch working with our search. So when we are initially rendering the page, it's going to be statically generated using the data from our getStaticProps function, which we're passing straight to our useSWR hook, which is taking in this initial data, which is coming from the getStaticProps. And then we have this query where we can search by the string, which of course is this input value here. Now, what I want to add into this is some pagination. Now, it's actually quite simple. Let me see, I was just testing it there. So we have this posts here where we are just fetching all the posts. By default, I think GraphCMS fetches 100 things on a default query. So what we can do, you can do this in a couple of different ways. And if you look at the GraphQL documentation, it will give you examples of either cursor-based pagination, where we will fetch certain things after a specific cursor. The way we're going to do it is we're going to be grabbing the first, and then this is how many things we want to grab. So we want to grab the first two. So if we add that, it's just grabbing 2 instead of the 3 that we have. And then the other option that we have is skipping 0, which is going to say basically we're going to grab the first 2 and skip none. Then if we want to grab the first, if we want to be on the next page, then we would skip 2, right? And then this is the next page. Now, GraphCMS provides us with a post connection model, which we can query. So if I do this now, post connection, it gives us some information. So we can do has next page, has previous page. We can do page size like this. So one thing to note is that this post connection is separate. It's a separate query. So what we actually need to do is use the post connection for our initial query. So let's swap that over first. So our query get post is the same. We're not querying the post, we're going to query post connection. And then all of this stuff is saying, yeah, we don't have that. So what we do have is the edges and then the node, and then we can have all of this stuff. So exactly the same thing, except we're querying this post connection, and that allows us to get certain data. So now we can get the page info, has next page, has previous page, and page size. And it is telling us, because we're getting the first 2 and we're skipping none, it's saying we don't have a previous page, we don't have a next page, and the page size is going to be 2. So that is pretty useful because that's going to help us to do our actual pagination. So let's take this query and then let's replace the query that we currently have with that. And that is actually going to break everything because we're actually getting different things returned. So rather than returning data.post, we're just going to return the data in here. So then what we can do down below is you can tell when we do the query, we're going to have data.post connection.edges, I believe, is where we data.post connection.edges. So that's not working. So let me just console log out this data. post connection edges is an empty array. Post connection dot edges. Post connection dot edges. Yeah, so we don't have anything apparently. So the first two, skip none, search value. We don't want this in here. Get post. We don't want this where. So let's see if that's going to work. Going to be property edges of undefined. So let's just put data.postConnection. Okay, so that is fine. So let's see if we're actually getting our data at all. So let me just check the response. Okay, yeah, so it's working. But what we need to now do is, if we look at the response, it is returning a node as an object. So we're mapping through the edges, that's fine. We're getting the post. So for each of these objects here, we're going to want the post dot node dot date, post dot node dot slug, post dot node dot title, post dot node dot description, post dot node dot author name. Okay, so it's working for our actual data fetch, but it's not working for the initial fetch here. And the initial data, so posts is data, initial data, so it should just be posts like this, I believe. If we refresh, okay, perfect. So we're now fetching the first two, nothing has changed. If we do fetching, then that is great. And this is doing only two because, of course, we're saying we only want the first two. We could change this if we wanted. However, we've only got three things. So for this pagination example, I only really want the first two. So each handler should have a key. So we break that, dot map, key equals post dot node dot slug. Okay, so that should fix that. Okay, brilliant. So now let's add on some buttons. So inside, so we've got our input, and there's, yeah, let's just make a new div. And then in here, let's add 3 divs like this. So if I add these, make these flags, and then in there I want a button. So we'll do previous. Let's copy that, and we'll do next. And then in here, let's do, you know, total pages. And then that is going to be our data dot post connection dot page info dot page size, like so. So we can see total pages is 2. So in this here, we can give some space between them and justify center. Good, it's looking good. So on these buttons, let's get these styled. So class name is going to be, so let's give them a background, I don't know, indigo 700. Text is going to be white. Pattern 3, pattern Y1 is Is that a button yet? Should be a button. Yep, so let's do a rounded button. Now, of course, these buttons aren't doing anything, but we have buttons. So one of the great things about the new JIT engine for Tailwind, we have everything enabled by default. So we can do something like this. So we can do disabled BG gray 100 text. Let's do 400, and disabled text gray 800. So basically we're going to say if the button is disabled, then we want it to be gray, so it's not clickable. And then what we can do is we can pass the disabled like this, and we can say if, and then we're looking at these values here. So has next page and has previous page. So if it's not data, and then we're going to do post connection page info has previous page. So if it doesn't have a previous page, then that's great. That should be disabled. Okay, perfect. And then on this button, we can do this has next page, like so. So we've got a next page, but not a previous page, which makes sense. And then what I can do on both of these is just say I want them to be like 20 wide, so they're both the same size. Look a bit cleaner. Yeah, so that's good. And then I am center. Let's center in the total pages. And I might just say text gray 700 here on the total pages. Let me actually just add that to this div. Okay, great. So not the best looking pagination, but it does the job for us. So let's figure out what we need to do and how we need to do it. So we are using first and skip. Now this first is going to stay the same. You usually wouldn't want to fetch just two things. So feel free to change that to, you know, like 5 or 10. And then the skip, what we want to do logically is, you know, it's going to start at 0. And then when we go to our next page, we want to increase it by the amount of things that we are fetching. So like I said, we're fetching 2 things at a time. So to get the first 2 things, we skip nothing. Then to get the next 2 things, we skip 2. And then we wouldn't want to pass skip 3. We want to be able to make a query there because there's nothing there. You can see we were only fetching 1 thing instead of 2 here. So the button is going to be disabled when we're on the second page. So we're not going to make that next one. So actually it would be skip 0 and then skip 2, and then for the next page it would be skip 4. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's do some React stuff to make this happen. So we've got our function here. So let's declare our skip and set skip values. Use state, and it's going to default to 0. And then on our buttons, what we want to do is unclick. So let's do, oh, what happened there? So let's do this. So we want to set skip equal to skip minus 2, sorry, because this is previous page. So we're going to do that. And then on this button, we're going to add 2. So again, it's not going to do anything right now. If we go to our state though, you can see we skip it once, it goes 2, 4, 6. It's not going to let us click the previous ones because that is not working yet. So, and the next isn't actually changing because we're not doing the data fetch. So that's what we need to do now. So we need this skip to be a variable in this function. So let's do that. So if we say skip, just skip lowercase, and that's going to be an int. And the skip here is going to be using that variable like so. So we're declaring the variable and the type here, and then we're actually using it here. And of course, it's going to come from this state. So then what we need to do is pass it into our query. So we got our search value and skip, and search value and skip. And in theory, have I changed it in the wrong place? Nope. So we've got our two initial data fetch. If we hit next, then you can see it worked. Our next button is disabled now, and our pagination is working. So you can see that the has next page and has previous page is pretty useful when it comes to doing the pagination. So that is pretty much set up. And if we did search Next.js and we've only got this, we've got no pagination whatsoever, which is what you would expect. So hopefully that makes sense and it gives you a good idea on the pagination.